Hello, everyone. My name is Arno Reese. I'm a cloud solution architect with VMware by Broadcom. This is a part two video to the VCDR or VMware Live Recovery product, and we'll be going over how ransomware protection works, in addition to what we had covered with a standard protection and recovery scenario in the VMware Live Recovery product. So on the previous one, we kind of went through and talked about what the console was and where everything was located. Here, we want to basically make sure that you have the understanding of how VMware Live Recovery works. So as you can tell, the squiggly lines aren't behaving, but that's pretty typical of a live demo. So we went over the recovery SDDC, our protected sites, our cloud file systems, what a protection group is and how that works and how recovery plans work. If you remember, we went in here and went to one of our recovery plans. It was probably the tier A app one, and there's a DR test and a failover. In addition to that, we also have ransomware recovery test and failover. So to initiate it, all we do is click test, and then we hit start ransomware test. And you'll see there's a couple different stages, right? When your VMs are being protected in the cloud file system, they're in backup. Once you're working on them, you're in validation, and when you're finished working on them, they're in staged. So generally here we just click start. We already have one that's kind of started, so we'll go over here to the Cyber Recovery Plan A, make no changes. And you'll see we have several VMs that are in different states, right? We have them in backup, so they're just, sitting in stasis being protected. We have some in validation that we're going to take a look at, and even one that's starting. So the one we're going to take a look at is this RWR WinServe-PY. And you'll see this particular VM when we go over to the VMC on AWS side is up and running and we are able to work on it. So we already started that recovery on it. The cool part about this particular product is the goal here is to give you all your tools in one particular product. So you don't have to have multiple vendors, things that are incompatible or not working together. And we also want to minimize how much you have to bounce around between even tabs as you're working through a ransomware recovery event, because at that point, probably everyone's pretty high stressed. There are timelines and SLAs that you're trying to achieve, and the goal here is to do it as quickly and cleanly and collaboratively as possible with your team. So when we go in here, again, there's a couple things in here that we'll go over. Kind of talked about it. VMs are either in backup, they're in process of being started. While we're working on them, they're in validation. When we're done working on them, they're staged, and then we can recover them. So let's go ahead and take a look at this WinServe-PY. We know that it's running. We know that we have some abilities with network isolation. We want to take a look at the snapshots, the security, threat severity, and vulnerability risks. And how did this information even get here, right? So let's take a look at that. So when we're in that particular VM and that particular snapshot of the VM, we get a bunch of tools all within one page, right? So we'll kind of go through them. The first thing we have is the ability to set badges for snapshots. And setting badges for snapshots is really important when multiple people are working on them, or you stop working and then go back to working on them. If you know that that particular snapshot of that virtual machine that you're working on has been touched. When they don't have anything, they're not badged. While you're working on them, you can either set them to verified, warning, compromised, or encrypted. The goal here is so that if you are working on it or multiple people are working on it, that you're not looking at the same snapshots and spending time or duplicating efforts. So to change one, you just click it, hit set badge, and it will change it. So you'll see that one was previously not warning, it was compromised. So we'll set that back. And that's how you change that badge. And you can do that for each and every snapshot. And that becomes very interesting as we kind of walk down the path of what you have available here. So the other thing that we have available is the ability to scan our snapshots of virtual machines as we're working on them. We use Carbon Black because that's a tool that we have in our tool belt. If you're running a different scanning tool, you have the ability to pause the startup and then remove that scanning tool and use Carbon Black. So that capability is built in. I can kind of show you guys how that works as we set up a protection group and where that is. Actually, we'll just flip over to it. So if you go into a recovery plan and you go into, it really doesn't matter any of them. let's just pick this. You'll see here under the ransomware recovery piece that you can use the integrated and then pause those VM, or do not use the integrated analysis at all. If you have a particular sensor that you trust and you want to use, you can do that as well. So let's just flip back to that recovery plan. So as we're working on this Windsurf PY, so the goal here is to badge those particular snapshots, isolate that VM. So that's kind of the next thing we'll take a look at. So since we have NSX, again, in our tool belt of VMware products, you have the ability to isolate virtual machines. As you're working on them, they will come up as quarantined in analysis. So they can't talk with anyone while you're sandboxing them in VMware Cloud on AWS as your recovery environment or working environment, right? So, so we have the ability to change that. You don't have to go to an NSX administrator and change it for this particular VM that you're working on. You just click the next one and then hit change network isolation. So if we want to change it to external outbound, we just change it and you'll see that come up. So that isolation has just been changed, as you see here. So actually it defaulted back. I think these are particularly locked. So that's the goal here, is to be able to change those. The other thing is we need to know a lot of information about these particular VMs. So if you do go to try a different snapshot, you'll see that the badges are here that we kind of talked about earlier. We also have change rates and entropy rates that are really interesting. So change rate is something that everybody knows. VM's change rate is how much it's changed over time based on, internal and external, things that affect that particular VM. Entropy rate is compressibility. So compressibility of a VM changes when it is encrypted. So as you encrypt a VM, its compressibility changes dramatically. So you'll see spikes here. That doesn't indicate that that's going to be, the exact time frame that a ransomware event happened, but it does help pinpoint of areas that you want to take a look at. So in here, you'll see there's a lot of standard snapshots and no changes in compressibility, but around here, we see some compressibility changes that may have, show that, a ransomware event has occurred and it's been compressed. To change a particular snapshot, we just click on the snapshot and we hit try different snapshot. So again, the goal here is to make this really quick and easy as you're iteratively going through snapshots to get to the last known good copy with the least amount of change that it's going to impact you and your end users. So the other goal here is to, give you that ability to understand what's going on with these particular VMs, and if you're using Carbon Black, you'll see all these alerts and vulnerabilities that come up, and it'll tell you what we believe is wrong with that particular VM, and it gives you the ability to do the changes here. So the other thing that we show is events, what has happened with that particular VM. This is good. Multiple people are working on it, and you see kind of, are they powered up, powered down, has sensors been installed or uninstalled, etc. So the other thing that we tout and we talk about a lot is the fact that our cloud storage, which is an NFS-backed Amazon AWS S3 volume, is NFS formatted, and you do not have to hydrate your virtual machines. So when you go and flip between particular snapshots here, it is very quick and iteratively pulled up. So the goal here, again, and we talked about this in the first video a bunch, is since it's an NFS formatted volume, you can run the virtual machines directly out of the cloud storage volume. So that speeds up things dramatically. You're not having to rehydrate or copy from somewhere or any other kind of rigmarole to get to your next snapshot. All of this within one particular interface. You don't have to talk to a storage person. You don't have to talk to an AWS person. You don't have to talk to a VMware person. All of it is, all within one console, and really streamlines your ability to get to that next snapshot that you want to work on, scan, and take care of. So that's really, the crux of how this works. The next thing, when you're done working on a particular VM, and, clearly you'd be working on that VM in here, right, or remoting into it, or however you decide to work on that Windsurf PY. When you're done with it and you've scanned it and you're comfortable that, you've changed the network isolation, you've made sure that that particular VM is good to go, and it actually did change. It just took a second to reflect, I guess. As we get comfortable with that particular VM, we can power off and stage it. So once that VM is powered off and staged, it is essentially ready to be, resurrected back where it originated. So you have that capability to resurrect it there or in another site if needed. So, and again, all of this really works really well together. So the goal here, in our particular dashboard is to let us know what our connectivity is. We've got a couple errors here showing up because we had a VMware Explorer demo that is in flight. They're tearing it back down. So, anytime we see a red exclamation point, generally take a look at that, right? But from our cloud file system, we kind of talked about that. This is our NFS-backed storage. Our recovery SDDC is going to be that VMware on AWS recovery SDDC. That's this guy right here. And so since I like to do live demos, I always want to make sure that everybody sees this looks, feels, and works just like a vSphere 8 environment or a VCF environment, because that's what it is, right? So we run VCF on here. We have the latest versions of vSAN, vSphere, NSX, all available to you to use and resurrect your particular VMs and keep them in that isolated recovery environment, that IRE, as we like to refer to. So, and again, when we're done, we can resurrect the virtual machines as we're working on them in our IRE, our isolated recovery environment here in VMC on AWS. They are, you're working in an environment that isn't, connected to your production, and it gives you that ability to get through those copies. So once you're done with that particular recovery plan, you'll see that there is, let me go back here. There is a VM. I thought we just have them in backup and validation. We don't have one staged and ready to go. But the last step is to bring it back to life. And that's really it. The goal here, again, give you all your tools all in one place. Make sure that you can easily, bring up your VMs, badge those VMs, scan those VMs, isolate those VMs, and work on those VMs very quickly and iteratively. So thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. And reach out to your account exec if you have any questions. Thank you.